dive a little deeper here into the mailbag. Here's a question that I liked from Sean VD42 in our Discord.
What up, Sean?
What will you guys be looking for in the regular season in terms of will this year be different in the postseason? Sean says his primary thing will be late game execution, such as Joel moving the ball quickly and avoiding late game turnovers. Where are your heads at on, what is a sign to you that, okay, postseason could be different this year and that they're trending in the direction they need to go from what I would say they've been like a fringe contender to, okay, we consider them an inner circle type of team?
So, there are a lot of things that would make me feel warm and fuzzy. And I think the one that he brought up, like game execution, depending on how you look at it, can be a little noisy in terms of sample size. But certainly you'd like to see them win close games. That's great. That makes you feel confident. You'd like to see them not collapse when Joel Embiid's on the bench. That would be freaking fantastic. You'd like to see Joel Embiid healthy by the end of the year. That's probably the biggest indicator. Unfortunately, you won't get an answer to that until very, very late.
Building off that, though, let's just say we obviously can't know and they can't guarantee Joel's health. But I think what we could see, Derek, as we're talking about that, if I see them taking an aggressive, we'll punt some of these games and we're prioritizing keeping Joel fresh and healthy over getting him to the 65 game threshold, over winning as many games as possible. I think that to me would show that the tree line that they're looking at is the right one, rather than we need to maximize every single game in the regular season.
And by the way, that he's also on board with it. He's okay with it.
And that's a critical piece of it for sure.
No, that would absolutely. Unfortunately, we've just seen so many instances where something completely random happens that you can take all the precautions in the world. It doesn't guarantee the result that we all want. But yeah, that would make me feel better if they were taking that approach. But the real truth is, I'm not sure there's anything where I'm going to feel fully confident, because you're just not going to be.
Because you're an anxious person.
I worry about everything. That is true. But also, I think Sixers fans in general will not fully believe in this team until they see Joel Embiid do it in the playoffs. And he can't do it in the playoffs until playoffs get here. So I think there's all kinds of indicators we would like to see, and certainly indicators on most teams and most eras, and the NBA at large. You would argue this is a good indication of playoff success. But I think there's going to be a sizable portion of the fan base who's just going to be like, I don't care. It's a regular season. It means nothing to me. I don't necessarily agree with that. I would like to, just two-way competency. They should be, you mentioned they were 11th last year in defense. That was probably overachieving for the squad. If they're 11th this year, you're really, frustrated by it. They should be at or close to top 5 on both sides of the court. That tends to portend well to playoff success. But again, I think there's going to be a sizable chunk of the fan base that's just like, I don't really care until the playoffs get here.
So for me, I'll just go in a different direction since you guys went there, which is correct answers, of course. I'll go with the Tyrese Maxey factor. Not the fact that he's all swole now, as we see all these photos and stuff.
It helps.
It does help. And I think it helps in this way, too, because...
Remember Iverson's, when he didn't get the MVP, and they're like, well, you could have, committed yourself to the weight, and was like, what, if I come in all swole, you're all going to give me the MVP next year?
I always love his answer at the end of everything, where he's like, it was heavy. It's not rocket science. Yeah. It's heavy. So for me, it's Tyrese Maxey, and it's this way. We've seen him take over games where we know he can score. The defensive part, we know that he wants to improve on that, where he's not the one that they can pick on that end of the floor as well. For me, it's the playmaking. You know that he can take over and score. Can he play make then and also make it easier for others, even in the guts of the game where they need him to make a play for others and not just himself? When he is now swole and can take that bump from the defense and not get knocked off his spot and still create and still be enough balance-wise where he can find his teammates for the scoring opportunity that are out there on the floor, because the double team is now coming his way. And so if he's able to do that, and we're able to see that consistently over the course of the year, when we get to the postseason and we see that maybe in that first round, and we're like, okay, this is really real, because the defense has changed. The defense has gotten even more physical for him now, and he's still doing the same exact thing when we're talking about his assist numbers. Maybe not being as high as over 6, because sometimes that extra pass goes, but he made that hockey assist to make it work for them to get that open shot. then I think that's something that will stand out and will be beneficial for not only him, but of course for his teammates, for his playmaking to be at that level of that is a big time improvement for year number 5. Maybe year 2 as an all-star. And that might also elevate him to that all-NBA conversation once again, where we saw the same thing for Jalen Brunson. Now, Jalen Brunson was more offense. We're talking defense here a little bit for Tyrese Maxey. But also, we know that Jalen Brunson can pass the basketball. It was the scoring and carrying a franchise. If he can do this by the scoring, taking over when Embiid is not in the game or not in the game at all because he didn't play, but the playmaking doesn't take a dip, I think that will be a big time boost for this offense this season.
No, and to your point, at this time, not at this time last year because we didn't have a show yet. In September of last year, that was the number one thing I was looking for coming into the season was Tyrese Maxey and his playmaking. Now, a big part of that is because that would then change what you were looking to do in the James Harden trade or the series of trades that would land you the next star. It became easier to find a third option, and this was the argument I made at the time. It's easier to find a third option that is a lead creator. And I think that proved out to be true because the third player you're able to get eventually from that James Harden trade is Paul George, who at this stage of his career, you're probably not confident in him being a lead creator. But if Tyrese Maxey can make that jump, then you are confident in him being a third option. And I think Tyrese Maxey made a step last year. I think he showed improvement. It's probably not where you need him to be if you're going to win a title. So I agree with you. That's a very key sign.
Here's what I want to see. I want to see Nick Nurse be the guy who he's advertised as rather than what we saw most of last season, which I don't blame him for, I would say, most of what went wrong, right? The personnel was not like Nick Nurse roster. And by the time you get to the playoffs, it's hard to do a lot of the mixing and matching when you've just been trying to cobble together a team. Now they don't have as many excuses where you have a bunch of wing athletes that you can throw out there. You can play the switchable lineups. You can full court press teams. I want to see them get aggressive in the scheme diversity that they're using. I want to see them throwing out different lineups, getting creative, playing multi-guard looks, which they did go to some of those really small looks in the playoffs when they needed campaign and a bit of offense there. But I want to see Nick, over the course of the 82 games in the regular season, really trying to just throw stuff at the wall and showing the sort of creativity that we've seen in spurts, but not necessarily here on a consistent basis. Like, what I also don't want to see is just defaulting to this guy is more experienced, I'm going to play him, which I think a lot of people expected to change from Doc Rivers to Nurse and was basically what we saw most of last year as the same, right? I want to see more Ricky minutes. I want to see more KJ Martin minutes. And I don't even particularly like KJ Martin. I just want to see them throwing different guys out there and trying to put athleticism on the floor and not being this slow, I don't want to say boring, but this slow meandering team. I want them to get up and down, right? Like I want to
they have the horses to do that.
They have the guys on this team, especially when it's if you play Tyrese and Ricky and KJ, Paul George to a lesser extent, obviously, right? But he can certainly fill a lane as a shooter and open up that middle of the floor for the athletes to run in transition. Maybe you get some spurts here and there from Bona where he's definitely a floor runner, rim runner as a big in transition. I just want to see Nick Nurse embrace this roster and do some goofy things from time to time.
Like
and I think
Toronto.
The main thing really, and Derek brought it up, is that you don't just die with Joel off the floor, right? It's Maxey and George and whatever else is around them figuring that out. And then the games that are completely without him, Andre Drummond holding down the fort, Bona being able to give them 10 to 15 decent minutes. That's my long way of saying pressure's on Nick Nurse, just like it is for all the players.
We all silly like the mayor.